not a week has gone past in my sister's life where she hasn't tried to commit suicide. She said in the day she came to your spiritual health day, she had determined that she was going to ask God for forgiveness for what she was about to do. She said, but she came home and she didn't commit suicide. And I just want to ask you a question, Nancy. What on earth has happened to my sister?
Oh, wonderful. Welcome, everybody. This is Simon Gilbo with Inspired. Great to be back for another terrific week we've got coming up. If you're new to Inspired, basically I'm sick to death of us being relentlessly bombarded by negativity and bad news in the media that just induces fear and anxiety and depression. Yeah. And Inspired is all about meeting different mates and contacts of mine from all sorts of life experiences who've done beautiful stuff and seen God at work in and through them, so that in, I don't know, about an hour's time, we'll close this off and you will be stirred in your faith to get back in the fray and to live full on for Jesus. So yeah, no doubt you're going to be inspired this week because we've got with us the wonderful Nancy Goudie. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you, Simon. It's wonderful to be with you.
Yeah, great to have you. So you're director of New Generation Music. That's NGM. You spent 40 plus years doing that with your wonderful husband, Ray. I think I spoke at your place about 20 years ago. It's not too far. I'm in Bath, so you're sort of Bristol way and Thornbury. That was where it was. You started a band with Ray called Heartbeat. We had on Trish a few months ago. Trish, now Morgan. She was Maguire. She was in your band. Malcolm Trish sort of run the church I'm part of here now. Dave Bankhead was in your band, and we've done stuff together out in Burundi. He's a lovely man. So there's lots of connections there. But let's go back to the beginning, Nancy. Yeah, I mean, I know, just age 6, wasn't it, when you first encountered Jesus? Tell us about that.
Oh, that was amazing. I was brought up in a family who loved Jesus, and they taught me to speak to him and expect him to speak back to me. And I remember at one point I thought, I need to give my life to Jesus. So I asked my dad, can I give my life to the Lord? And he looked at his 6-year-old daughter and thought, does she really understand the big decision she's making? So he kind of put me off and said, look, why don't you try a little bit later in life when you understand the decision you're making? And I just accepted that. But God obviously thought different, because what happened was when I was at home one Sunday evening, my brother was being put to bed, my little brother who was 3. My dad was out putting him to bed. My mum was at church, and I was in the lounge by myself, and I had an encounter with God. It was just incredible. I fell to my knees and I lost the power to stand, and I tried to push against the couch to stand up again, and I couldn't. And so I laid my head on the couch and thought, I'll have a little rest and then I'll try again. But when I went to try again, it was as if a hand had been put over the back of my neck and a hand over the back of my legs. And immediately I knew it was God. Because you see, that was the way my mum and dad taught me to pray at night before going to bed. Right. Kneeling beside my bed. But the thing is, what they did was they told me what to pray and I would just repeat it. So I didn't know how to pray. I didn't know what to say. So I said my first ever real prayer, which was this: Dear God, I'll tell my daddy. Immediately, the pressure lifted from me. I stood up. My father came into the room and I told him what happened. And he said, come on, I'll tell you how to become a Christian. And I became a Christian that night. Oh my goodness, the joy that filled my heart and the excitement about telling other people about Jesus has just never left me.
Wonderful. Was it plain sailing through your teens?
Reasonably so. I would say God kept me from the big things that could have gone wrong. But I was probably not as on fire as I would have wanted to be at that point. But it was through the teens that my husband actually was in a band, and I went to see this band, Christian band, and it was through that band that my flame was ignited again. And I met Ray, and a few years later, we both got called into full-time work together, which was exciting.
Brilliant. So I think from reading your book, which I've got here, who would ever have thought? I think you were 14, were you? And he was 16 when you first met Ray. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I met him in the back of a bus. Would you believe? My father had tickets for the Usher Hall, which is a huge hall in Edinburgh, for a Christian concert. And so my dad said to me, why don't you sell these to all your friends? And I had masses of friends right across the whole, churches. Wasn't just the church I went to, it was masses of churches. And a friend of mine brought my husband Ray, or Raymond as he's called in Scotland, onto the bus. And I sat in the back seat of the bus with a whole crowd of guys and girls. And that's how I first met him. But I didn't start going out with him till I was 16 years of age. And then we got engaged at the age of 18 and married at the age of 20.
And was it always going to be a crazy adventure with Ray?
Oh, yes. Yes, definitely. He was a very creative guy, and he pushed for excellence. He didn't like anything that was second rate. He wanted it to be excellent. And so he pushed for that all the time. And through everything he's done in terms of his musicals or in terms of what we created at our Cadman complex in Thornbury near Bristol, he's always pushed ourselves, but also other people, to believe that God could do incredible things through them. And yeah, that's happened to various people who took a hold of it and believed it. For instance, if I tell you that my husband once said to me, must have been after Heartbeat days, or just as Heartbeat was coming to a close, Nancy, I think you've got a book in you. You could write a book. And I went, no way. I could never write a book. I was just imagining what my English teacher at school would say.
Yeah.
And I was like, no way, Ray. No way. I could not write a book. He says, I tell you, you've got a book in you. And he didn't say anything else about it, but then we went to see our record company. It was about doing another album. And as we sat and talked to them about the album, suddenly at the end of the conversation, because they were book publishers as well, he said, oh, by the way, I just wanted to say, I've just told Nancy that she's got a book in her. I think she's got a book in her. Nancy, would you like to tell them what's inside of you? And I'm sitting there drawing them daggers, saying, I didn't say anything, but I thought, wait till I get you outside.
Yeah.
And then I came out with this idea of writing my first book, and I came away with a contract to write 2 books for this company. Wow. And I came outside and said, Ray, what have you done? I can't write a book. But I did. I did write it. And I discovered a real heart for writing. I loved it. But that was the way Ray pushed, and saw the potential. That was very much Ray's gift. He saw the potential in people, and he just encouraged it.
Wonderful. And it's not just one book, is it? You've had 19 books and counting in you. So fantastic. Yeah, my wife, I said I was about to come on with you. She said, yeah, I read a book of hers when I was a teen. So there you go. Books are missionaries in their own way, aren't they? They get far beyond where we can get ourselves in our own sort of capacity. But books, the power of books is a beautiful thing. By the way, have you got any book stories? Have you got any stories of people, that read it and then did something crazy or came to faith or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, there's one book that's just come out called You Are Loved. And it's a tiny little book, but you can open it at any page and it will encourage you. That's the kind of book that I've been writing in the last while. And I've done 5 of them. I hope to do another one. But that particular book, someone got a hold of it, loved it, and paid for it to go to Israel right now. Wow. So in Israel, there's a Christian cafe there, and they have my books in there for people to come in and just take it if they want to take it out or read it while they're there. And that's been exciting. We're waiting to hear for stories from that, because I believe there's going to be quite a number of stories there. Also, when I was just recently in hospital, I saw the need for encouragement and patience. And so what I did after I left was to send them 40 or so books and said, just give them out. I give them to the staff, but also give them out to anyone who needs it. And I got a letter back from a nurse who had been off ill while I was giving out the books. Came back and someone said, I kept this book for you. It's for you. And she opened it up and she read it and she wrote to me saying, Nancy, this book has just been the thing I needed to hear, and it's transformed me. So, yeah, God's been doing incredible things through books, which is wonderful. I've sent them into prisons. One prison had about, I think it was 400 women in it. So I sent 400 books into that prison. And again, it's just like it opens up people to the gospel, opens up people to the truth about who they really are. And it's been exciting to see what has happened. One girl came to a spiritual health day I did in Southampton, and I had a word from God that there was going to be someone there who wanted to commit suicide, but God wanted to say to them that they were someone who was called and chosen, and he had a purpose and a plan for them. Nobody responded on that day, but a few weeks later, I got an email from a girl, or from a lady, who said, Nancy, I do not believe in God. I have a sister who came to your spiritual health day, and both of us were abused when we were children. And not a week has gone past in my sister's life where she hasn't tried to commit suicide. She said, the day she came to your spiritual health day, she had determined that she was going to ask God for forgiveness for what she was about to do. And when she went home, she was going to commit suicide. She said, but she came home and she didn't commit suicide. And I just want to ask you a question, Nancy. What on earth has happened to my sister? So I wrote back saying, I know what's happened to your sister. I know you don't believe in God, but look, God has happened to your sister. And I told her about what God told me. And I started a conversation with her. Well, I never heard back. I told her to read one of my books, and she never wrote back, so I didn't know where to send the book. Anyway, unknown to me, the sister had got one of my books, and she had given it to her sister to read. She read it. She listened to my meditation CDs. And after a couple of weeks or so, she went to church. And she gave her life to Jesus.
Come on.
She wrote back to me saying, I now know what has happened to my sister. I haven't had so much peace in my heart and my life. But the story doesn't finish there, Simon. Wait till you hear this. She got the original lady was badly damaged inside because of the abuse, and she ended up in hospital, and she got sepsis when she was in hospital, and she was transferred from the Southampton hospital to somewhere near London. And they wrote to tell me, please pray for her, because the doctor has said she will not last the night. And I just happened to wake up in the middle of the night and saw this text. And so I started praying for her. The team prayed the next day. The sister and her husband, they were praying. And the doctor had said she's not going to last the night because the infection rate, the highest we can go is 450. She has 450 plus. So she's not going to last the night. The next day, she was still alive. And the doctor said, I don't understand this. I'm just about to take the infection marker again. So he took the blood test. He got the results back and it was 0.8.
Oh.
And the doctor said, no, this is wrong. This is wrong. So he went and tested again, 0.8. So then he said, well, the one from the previous night was wrong. So he retested the blood sample from the previous night and it was 450 plus.
Wow.
And he could not understand this. So the girl, when she woke up, said, this is God.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you what's happened in my life. And told this doctor, this is what happened. And he said, well, I don't believe in God. It's got to have a medical reason as to what happened to you. And she said, no, it's got to have a spiritual reason. And it's my God that's done it. Anyway, he was seen because she gave him my book and she gave him my meditation CD, and he was seen to reading it and listening to the meditation CD. And then I got another email. And this time, as I'm reading it, I'm thinking, who is this? And then as I'm reading it, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this is the doctor.
No way.
The doctor wrote to me saying, I want you to know, Nancy, how far and wide your ministry has gone. And he began to tell me some of the story of his journey. And he said, because of this girl's testimony and because of what you've done, how this has happened and your books, etc. He said, my wife and I are going to an Alpha course.
Wow.
And then I got an email maybe 3 weeks after that saying, my wife and I have given our lives to Jesus.
Praise
Oh,
the Lord.
yes.
Incredible.
Isn't it?
It really is. Oh, and your book, who would ever have thought, is just packed with those stories. But that one's not in it, is it?
No, it's just happened recently.
Yeah, wow. Oh, anyway, listen. I mean, by the way, is that story over, or have you got?
No, that's well. It is over for the moment, but I have a thing on line that's called Tea and Cake with Nancy. And it's basically telling stories of faith and encouraging people's faith. And the girl, while she was in hospital, she got online so that she could listen to what I was saying, but not just her. She had about 3 or 4 different patients who were all round and listening to it. And one of them went to, when she got released from the hospital, she went to the same church that this girl goes to. So I think we're going to see even more.
Nancy, rock on. Hey, listen, we're just chronologically we've shot far ahead, so let's come back to Heartbeat years. So, I mean, actually, you were a singer. Ray was the drummer, was he?
He was, indeed, yes.
Chronologically, was it 1981 that you started Heartbeat?
Yes, we did.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, we left Scotland after a period of 6 months of God telling us, you have to go, you have to go, you have to go. And I was keen on going after about 2 months, but Ray wanted to be absolutely sure because he was leaving his mum and dad's business. His mum and dad were not happy at all. And they didn't want the family broken up, is what they felt. But we felt it was right to go. And so we went to England with a vision to start a band and to infiltrate the youth of this land. Because a lot of people go, as you'll know, a lot of people go as missionaries abroad. And that's right, and that's good, and that's exactly what should happen. However, this land is a missionary land. We're living in pagan days when people don't know who Jesus is. Yeah. And so what we did was we brought a band and we prayed it into being, basically. We didn't advertise for it. We prayed that people would write to us at Youth for Christ, which is what we were in at the time, British Youth for Christ, and ask if there was a band that they could join. And that's exactly what happened. So us, together with 4 other people, we started a band called Heartbeat, and we did 2 things, and those 2 things we still do today. One is to encourage the church, to build up the church, to tell them you're important, not just the adults, but the teenagers particularly as well, and to see how God can use them. And then the other avenue was to go into schools, colleges, universities, prison, and tell people that God can set them free, and free in their hearts and minds, and discover who God is. And oh my goodness, we saw incredible things happen through going into schools and colleges. To tell one story, I mean, there's masses of stories, but let me tell you one which happened in Birmingham. We went into various schools. We invited them to come. We never sold tickets for it. We just gave out tickets. So we never knew how many people were actually coming. So we prayed and prayed and prayed and asked God to bring, so that the place was full. It was 600 people. And so many came, we had to ask the Christians to leave. Mm-hmm. And that happened to us quite often. We had to ask the Christians to leave. And then we did our concert. Ray at the end would do a 10-minute preach. We'd invite people to become Christians. And he did that. And the whole place stood at his appeal. And I'm like, we've got a video of this. And I'm like going up to Ray and saying, no, Ray, they haven't understood you. They haven't understood. You need to get them to sit down and really explain it to them again. So he got them all to sit down. He said, now listen, this is what it means to be a Christian. It means turning your back on the things you've done wrong. It means going God's way. It means actually asking God to be boss of your life. Now, only if you really want to become a Christian, stand. And they all stood again. And I'm like, no, they definitely haven't understood. So I go up to them again on stage and say, no, they definitely haven't understood, because I saw a couple in the balcony who were in their 70s, I would say. And I thought they must know Jesus, because I knew that all Christians had been asked to leave, but they must have stayed. It's what was in my mind. So he got them all to sit down again. And he said, now listen, God is not mocked. If you're only standing because your mate's standing, then I don't want you to stand. I want you to stand if, in fact, you want to give your life to Jesus. They all stood again. There was over 600 people gave their lives to Jesus that night, including the couple in the balcony who had just heard the music and came in and didn't know God at all. So, yeah. Exciting days. Yes, and we have that happen again and again and again all over the country. Yeah. We saw hundreds every week come to know the Lord Jesus.
You're in the charts. You appeared on Top of the Pops. Julian Shepherd is a member of my church, St. Andrew's Community Church in Fox Hill, and he was in Bradford and Avon, and he stood up at one of your gigs.
Wonderful.
And, so it's very close to home. And there'll be hundreds, I don't know, I was going to say 100,000, maybe tens of thousands. Who knows that through that decades-long ministry of yours gave their life. Go on, give us a further highlights reel beyond Birmingham. I'm sure there's loads more stories.
Yeah, we went to Northampton, and I remember we had gone in to various schools. The place was packed, and but I want to tell you about 10 people who became Christians at that one school, the school that we had, gone into mainly. And as we were speaking, hundreds came to know the Lord, but this crowd from this particular school went back into their school the next Monday and asked the only Christian teacher in the school if she would help them start a Christian union. Brilliant. Which they did. And they prayed and they prayed and they prayed. They prayed during the lunch break in school that God would bring people to their mates to get to know him, because they knew how much God had changed them, and they wanted the whole school to get to know how to find God for themselves. And so they thought, oh, that's not long enough, lunchtime. So what they did was they began to pray before school. And then they thought, that's not long enough. So they prayed before school, they prayed at lunchtime, and they prayed after school. 2 years later, there was over 200 people in the Christian Union. Wonderful. And I gave that story out at Birmingham at the NEC. And this couple came up to me and she said, I was one of the original group. And the husband said, and I was one of the ones that came afterwards because of their witness. Just wonderful.
Superb. You'll know LZ7, Linz Westonco. He's been on the podcast, and I suppose he's they're like the next generation of Heartbeat, aren't they? Just
they are
rocking it, going around nightclubs and all sorts. And they've been here in Bath.
Absolutely,
fantastic. I love what they're doing. Any more of those stories you want to share?
Yeah, I can go on forever.
Yeah, keep going. We love them.
Well, we were at the place in Preston. It's their little theatre that holds 800 people. the Charter Theatre, I think it's called. And we had taken it on board this time, not just for one night. We took it on board for 5 nights. Now, this was a huge walk of faith for us because we'd had enough to fill one night throughout the years, but never 5 nights. And so we prayed and prayed and prayed that God would bring these teenagers to come to know Jesus. And we were in schools for about 3 weeks. And so we, on the last night, or the last time we prayed, I should say, before the first night started, we were at this, in the actual hall praying. And I had that the Charter Theatre is built, or was built, I don't know if it still is, in a shopping centre. And so I had to go down into the shops to get something for myself. And I came out of the door after the prayer meeting and I could not believe what I saw. 2 hours before the event was starting, there was a long queue of people waiting for the doors to open. Teenagers, and they just poured in every night. There was so many coming that we had to ask the Christians to leave again. And we went into another hall, and one of our youth worker, Malcolm Morgan, took the crowd that was in there and really basically just told them stories of faith and what God has done and all the rest of it. And people became Christians in the overflow as well as in the main hall. People were saved, healed, set free. It was incredible. One lady, or one girl, I should say, her mum and dad were divorced. But they always came together to do stuff for the girl. So the girl asked them both if they would come to the concert with her. They both did. And the 3 of them stood to give their lives to Christ at the end. Beautiful. And when we left Preston, the couple were on the journey to get their marriage sorted out. Lovely. Just amazing.
And, I'm in a different way, not through music, but through itinerant preaching. You don't know what happens necessarily. You see some fruit, you see some people stand, lift their hand or whatever, but you don't necessarily know. But then it is so encouraging, isn't it, when you 5, 10, 2 years later, 20 years later, hear stories. Share some of those sort of feedback that you got later.
Oh, my goodness. We were, Ray and I, wherever we travelled, we met people who said, "Oh, you're Ray and Nancy Goudie." We would say yes. Said, "You used to be in Heartbeat." And I said, "Yes, that's right." But I became a Christian through Heartbeat. And that was stunning. I loved that. We were one day going on a plane. I can't remember where we were flying to, but this flight attendant who wasn't on our plane, but was passing by, recognized us and came up and spoke to us and said, that Heartbeat had just changed their life. And those kind of stories just really, really bless me because, as you say, as an itinerant speaker like I am, you sometimes don't hear what goes on, but it's wonderful when you do. It really is. It's just encouraging because you know that even when sometimes you think, "Oh, that didn't go very well," God seems to just use that time and brings people to himself, which is wonderful. Yeah.
So why did you wind it up?
Basically because God told us to. We had always said we will do whatever God wants us to do. We will go wherever God wants us to go, and we will say whatever God wants us to say. And we used to say to Heartbeat members the whole time, when God comes to tell us we need to stop Heartbeat, then we will do that. And so they knew that. And then we received, basically Ray and I began to get stirrings that it was coming to the end of Heartbeat. But we didn't want to just do that on a stirring. We wanted to absolutely know for sure that God had said that. And unknown to us, Gerald Coates had been praying for us. And one of his very prophetic people, Trish Richardson, I think it was, had a word for Heartbeat. And so when Gerald was speaking at an event nearby. We happened to go along, and he saw us in the audience, and he came and spoke to us and said, "I'm so glad you're here, because Trisha's got a word for you, and this is what it is." And it wasn't thus saith the Lord, but it was a picture. And as we meditated on this picture, we felt that it was time for Heartbeat to fly, basically. And that she saw arrows coming up from the main arrow and flying out. And we felt that means that some of Heartbeat will leave and fly in their own ministries. And that the main one moved a slight distance away from where they were at the present time. And so we thought, maybe we're moving as well. And then Lynn Green of YWAM, he was on a mission with us in Swindon, and he gave us a word, and the word was, unless a seed goes into the ground and dies, then there won't be much fruit. But if it dies, there will be enormous fruit. And we were like, oh my goodness, I think this means that Heartbeat's got to stop. So we took all the words and we took everything we had to the rest of the people in Heartbeat, and we said, look, test this and see what you feel. And over Christmas time, take time to pray and seek God and see what you feel. Came back, and it was just remarkable how people felt. Mostly people felt it was the right thing to do. There was a couple who were a little bit more, but we decided to leave it for 9 months. And it took 9 months of praying the baby into being. And so we took 9 months of asking God to move it through into where it died, and God would raise something special afterwards. And so we didn't feel that NGM, because we were then called NGM at that point, we didn't feel NGM should stop, but we felt that Heartbeat was a vehicle that needed to die. And so we did. We had a farewell concert. Somebody put it on for us, and I couldn't believe it. Honestly, at the beginning, when Heartbeat started, we could hardly get 10 people to come and see us. And when we finished, there was over, I think it was 2,200 or 2,400 people in this place. Oh, absolutely. The place was heaving. And a lot of these people had come to know the Lord Jesus through the work of Heartbeat. I think I spent most of the night in tears. It was fantastic, really great. And NGM has continued, and we began to train people up. We'd already started this actually when Heartbeat finished, but we had begun to train other bands up, other artists up, other communicators up who would do the kind of things that Heartbeat had been doing over the years. And in particular, we wanted people either to go into the church, to encourage the church, to build up the church, to help bring revival to the church. And the other prong, of course, was into the mainstream media. And so we prayed for people to go to the West End. We prayed for people to go to nightclubs. We prayed for people to go into the music industry. And we prayed for people to be salt and light in there. Now, you can't always go in and preach as we did in Heartbeat days, but we can go in and just minister through who we are. And that is what our people have done. We've had people in the West End. We've had people traveling all over with musical theatres. We've had people in America in, the music industry, the top end of the music industry. It's been incredible.
So good.
And the media as well, into, the television, etc.
Yeah. I mean, I see you guys a bit like when it talks about Ephesians 4, be it the apostle, the prophet, the pastor, teacher, evangelist. Their job is not to prophesy, pastor, teach, evangelize. It's, verse 12, to equip God's people for works of service so that the body of Christ may be built up. And so for me, what that looked like back in Burundi was that for the first 3 years I went out there, 99, most dangerous country in the world. I thought I'd die. People tried to kill me. It was nuts. And I preached with such an urgency because, today's my last day sort of thing. And I know, who knows, I might have seen about 10,000 people come to Christ, but it wasn't a sustainable model. And I came back for a year, and the takeaway from that year, further theological, missiological reflection, was Ephesians 4, 11 and 12. Instead of me going back to Burundi preaching every day like I'm going to die, no, why not multiply myself out 1,000 times or even more in terms of equipping God's people to do it? And basically, you have done that, haven't you, in the music industry? So there's not one heartbeat. There's 30 or there's 50 heartbeats and mutations of that, and into all the different range of what the arts constitutes. I absolutely love that. Go on, tell us some more stories on that.
Well, some of the stories we can't really tell. That's sure. The problem, because, to be salt and light, if some people see you preaching the gospel, they might not actually allow you to stay. Yeah. So some of the stories I can't say, but to say that one girl was in the West End, and she got together with her friends who were not Christians, but in the cast. And she said to them, look, I would quite like to pray together before we go on stage, just to give us confidence. And, she kind of put it across like that. And then they started praying, and then she did a Bible study with them. Wonderful. Before the event was going on, they were holding a Bible study, So things like that were infiltrating people's hearts and lives. People ask questions rather than necessarily you preaching at them. Although, to be honest, the love that you give and the example that you give is preaching, but it's not preaching with words.
That's right. Yeah.
Hi, folks. I hope the summer is going well for you. Back in Burundi, it's so difficult. There's a fuel shortage, there's a sugar shortage, it's the dry season, and people are just really struggling to feed themselves. This podcast comes out on the auspices of Great Lakes Outreach. If you want to sow into our work, if you're being blessed by the podcast, I'd love it. Any sum at all, monthly or as a one-off. Please, if you want to, go to greatlakesOutreach.org/inspired. And that'd be a massive encouragement and blessing. All right, now let's get back to the podcast.
Now, there are stack loads of these stories in your books, but you have lived for over 44 years by faith, depending on God for your finances.
Yes.
Now, I've actually got a salary now, and I actually look back to those days when I didn't have a salary and I was relying fully on God for my finances, because I've got fantastic stories. And in terms of an apologetic for my faith, I don't feel like I could ever give up my faith, because I know that God intervened here and there and in the most clear, dramatic ways. And it's so edifying, isn't it? Now, you've got 44 years of stories. I'm going to only give you three stories. Go on, tell us your three best stories. It doesn't have to be chronologically in order, but, where God intervened in the most beautiful way that you just knew that, you were on track and you were tested in your faith.
Yeah, this one happened before I actually came into full-time work, and Ray and I were both on salaries at our home in Scotland. Mm-hmm. And he was away with Dave Pope in a tour in Canada, and I was going out to join him. And God so dramatically changed my husband and called him into full-time work while he was over there. And he phoned me at 11 o'clock at night, totally forgetting that it was 4 o'clock in the morning in my time. But when he told me what God had done, I was just, so excited. And he said to me, Nancy, could you bring with you £50? And I just said, that's fine, never thinking, and it was only after I came off the phone that I thought to myself, I don't have £50, because Ray had said he'd been living on a hamburger and a pot of milk every day because he wanted to eke out as much money as possible. And so he said, bring £50 with you. So in the the kind of hours afterwards, as I'm thinking through, where am I going to get £50 from? I'm like, Lord, help me with this. And then suddenly I remembered a retired minister had given me £10 to give to Ray when I went over to America. So I thought, Lord, I need £40. And that's all I said. Next morning, there was 2 letters in the post. One letter was from London. I didn't know anyone in London, but I opened the letter, and inside it, this shows you how long ago this was, but inside it was 4 £10 postal orders.
Wow.
I could not believe it. I got down on my knees and I said, God, I'll never, ever,
So good.
I'll never ever think that you're not going to be faithful to me. I just believe it, that you will be. But I have, at times thought, God, where's the money coming from? But God provides it. And it could be £40 like that was, or we have a £3 million mission and arts complex that we now have our offices in, and our training all goes on there. And God provided every penny. We don't have any loans on the building. We rely on God to give us the money that we need to keep that building going. And God does, all through different ways and methods, etc. And sometimes it comes very near the line, and sometimes even over the line.
Yeah.
You think, I need it by such and such a time. And God says, no. I can push that limit. And he does.
Yeah.
And that's been really wonderful.
Well, I've been involved in building a $5 million centre in Burundi, and it totally was such a brain fryer and so stressful as a project that took a long time. I was rereading your story of how you got that 3 million, and that's 3 million 20 some years ago. So that's a lot more into today's money. But mind blowing sum. Just fill us in because you went to the States, met with a few millionaires, even met with a billionaire, expecting to get money off them.
Yeah.
You had to tell the builders to stop the project because it wasn't good, which is going to be a slur on the name of Christ, because people knew it's going to be this Christian arts centre. And then what happened?
It was amazing because God gave us a word in America. He took us to America. We thought for the money. Mm-hmm. And as you say, we met 1 millionaire, 2 millionaires, and then a billionaire. And I was like, this is where we're going to get the money, And we didn't. What we got was a word from God, which was based on the story of Jesus raising Lazarus. As in, I'll tell you what Martha said, if you believe, you will see the glory of God. And
yes.
I was like, okay, Lord, we're trusting you. And about 3 days after we came home and told the team that, we got a visit from 2 friends of ours who came to us, and they said, did you get the money when you went to America? And we said, no, we didn't. And we said, we knew you wouldn't, because God's told us to give you it.
Wow.
And there was a little condition in there, which was, I guess, quite hard in one way, but easy in another way, which was that Ray and I have never had a pension and never saved for a pension or whatever. But the same people had given Ray and I some money to put aside in a pension pot. And it isn't enough for a pension, but part of their condition was that if we would partner with them and give what was in the pension pot, then they would give all the rest. So we said that we would. And I didn't even know if we could get the money out of the pension pot, but we did. We were able to do that. And we gave our bit. And as we gave our small bit, which to us was huge, because it was a massive amount of money to us, but to them was, it was smaller, and they gave everything, not just the 100,000 we were looking for, but they gave us 1 million, over 1 million, to complete the project. And their generosity and the generosity of the people who support the work of NGM was just amazing. And we got the rest of the money, and the project was able to start up again and be completed.
It's just so good, and I've been there, and it's state of the art. It's absolutely, it is excellence, isn't it? Ray wanted to do things with excellence, and
Yes.
absolutely stunning facilities and all sorts of different rooms and expertise has been able to be manifest. Wonderful. Now, you were such a close double act, inseparable, weren't you? And then in 2016, sadly, Ray got cancer. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, it's a long story, so I'll try and condense it. But basically, he had stomach problems, and it wasn't diagnosed until, that was in 2014. It wasn't diagnosed till the April of 2015. And after I had to take Ray to hospital because he was in such horrendous pain. And I came out of the hospital at something like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and got my car and went home. And, the next morning we got told that he had the worst kind of cancer you could ever have, which was pancreatic cancer. He was able to have an operation to take away most of his insides, and he took that. There's only a very small percentage of those who have pancreatic cancer that can have that operation. And so we did that. But more than that, I've got people to pray. I put it on Facebook, what had happened to Ray, and asked people if they would pray. And something extraordinary happened, because all over, not only was it the people who knew us, but all over the world, people who didn't know us were tuning in every day, if you like, because I gave a report for prayer at the beginning, both in the morning and in the evening. And people would get saved through that, through my posts. Wonderful. Which was incredible. Yeah. And others, their faith was encouraged, and people kept saying, Ray will live and not die. Even people who have ministries of seeing people raised from the dead said Ray would live and not die. He was at one point told he was cancer-free. They encouraged him to go on holiday, which we did. Mm-hmm. We went to Spain. I could see that he wasn't too well at times in Spain, but we were enjoying our time over there. Our son, our younger son, and his wife came to stay. Well, it wasn't his wife at the time. It was his, he was engaged to her. They came and they stayed in our apartment, had a 3-bed apartment there, and they stayed in 2 of the bedrooms. And they were just had special times, with us. Came home from that holiday, and Ray was in pain. And so we went into the hospital, and they had just got the results of Ray's scan back. And the surgeon, who was a Christian, broke the news to us that Ray was going to die. And the doctor had said that he had 2 days to live. Wow. Which, of course, was a huge shock to us, because we weren't expecting that at all. Not at all. My son had been told that, his dad was fine, and he had gone back to America, and he immediately had to take another plane and come back again. They said he would last 2 days. Well, he didn't. He lasted just over 2 months. And in those 2 months, he got better and better and better and better, until the day that he died. He was off all his meds. It was just remarkable what had happened. And he was just feeling rather tired that day. And he could see that I was worried. So he leaned over the bed and grabbed a hold of my arm and said, Nancy, I am absolutely fine, love. Don't worry about me. We've just got to trust God. And he had always said, if God takes me, then I tell you, if I die, then it's my time to go. He said, because there's a time for each of us to go. And if this is my time, then you will know it by the fact that God has taken me. Well, that day he slept most of the day. I stayed beside him the whole time. The only time I left him was to phone people and say, please pray. And then a friend came and gave me dinner at 7 o'clock at night. I went down to get the dinner and left Ray for 10 minutes, came back up, and he was gone. It was, the worst time of my life, because I was like, no, this is not supposed to happen. So, of course, I did everything that you were trained to do. I rebuked the spirit of death. I commanded it to go. I commanded his spirit to come back to him. I said, God, bring him back. But nothing happened. And I then called my assistant and my son, who lives here locally, and asked them to come round. And that night, you can imagine all the conflict in my mind. This wasn't supposed to happen, And the doctor came and certified that he had died, and his body was then taken away by the undertakers. And I stood beside the same bed that Ray died in. And as I stood there, a few minutes earlier, the enemy spoke so clearly to me. I couldn't hear from God, but my goodness, could I hear from the enemy? His voice was so loud and clear, and he said, God has turned his back on you. Turn your back on him. And honestly, I did consider it just for a few seconds. And then I remembered what God had done throughout the whole of my life. I remembered what Ray had said. I remembered how God had been so faithful and kind and loving towards me. And so I stood beside that bed and I declared out of my mouth. So I spoke it aloud. And I said, God, I have 101 different questions and I don't have the answer to any of them. But God, I want to say to you, I'm not called to understand everything, but I am called to trust you.
Yeah.
And trust you is what I'm going to do. And that night, while I was in bed, God gave me two gifts. One was the peace that passes all understanding. I physically felt it come on me.
Yeah.
It didn't stop me mourning, didn't stop me crying, didn't stop me wishing my husband was still back. But I felt this peace that passes understanding in me. And then God gave me another gift. And I didn't tell anyone I had this gift for a while because it just seems so bizarre to have when you're mourning. But of course, the Bible tells you that God will give you this. And it was like, I explained it like a bubble of joy. Joy deep inside me bubbled up. And those two gifts have sustained me for all these years since 2016 and have given me the ability to go out and speak to people and tell them about, what God has done for me. Wonderful. And how he took my husband.
Well, Ray Goudie, we salute you. And he's probably one of the best drummers in heaven, isn't he? So having a good time. Listen, I knew this is going to be frustrating because I knew we were going to run out of time and there's too many good stories. But more recently, I think it was in 2022, it was in November, you were admitted into the ICU at a hospital nearby in Bristol with a traumatic brain injury. You weren't expected to live. Just in closing, tell us about that.
Yeah, I was, had just come back from America. And my assistant called me the next day. She thought, she's not answering because she's got jet lag, which was natural. But I didn't answer my phone. I didn't answer texts. And she began to get worried. She got nudges from God. And so her and her husband came round to see if I was okay. The house was in darkness. They couldn't get in because although they had a key, my key was in the other side. And they phoned the police. The police came, 8 of them, 2 were armed police because they thought I might be kept, and not able to leave because someone had a gun on me or whatever. And they got in. They discovered me on my bed, fully clothed, lying on my bed, unconscious. I had been unconscious for 27, 28 hours. I had sick all over me, blood all over me. They didn't know that I had a brain injury with 2 brain bleeds, 1 blood clot in a vein, and I had fractured my skull. It was at a time when they couldn't get an ambulance. We phoned the husband phoned a friend. He happened to be passing our house. He was a medic in the ambulance service, used to be an NGM, came in, took control over the police, recognised there was something going on in my brain, got me a ambulance, was taken, put in a machine to see what was wrong with me. And they said, she's not going to live. I don't think she needs to get her kids to come. Kids, they were in 20s and 30s. And I was like that for about 3 weeks. Began to get better, but was speaking a load of rubbish. The doctor said, that's what your mum will be like for the next year or so. I said to my son, who sat beside me every day, my younger son, and I said to him, look, son, would you help me? I said, there's someone who has helped me on this journey, and I really want to thank them for their help. And he said, of course, Mum. I said, well, I don't know how to get in touch with them, but I really want to say thank you to him. Would you help me? Yeah, of course I will, Mum. Who is it? And I said, well, the person that has helped me the most in this journey is Tom Hanks.
Brilliant.
Tom Hanks! I can't believe it. And you know something? That seemed just so natural and right to me at the time. And that was when I was beginning to feel better. So, yeah.
Even more dotty than usual. Brilliant. Fantastic. Oh.
Yeah. I was then transferred to a brain rehab hospital. And the doctor told me I would be in there for at least 6 weeks. And I couldn't help it. I was like, 6 weeks? Thinking I should be in it for 2. And he said, yes, you're a very ill woman. And he said it 3 times, you're a very ill woman. And he said, he put a little phrase on afterwards that said, unless you can prove me wrong. And I thought, right, my God, and I will prove you wrong. And
Brilliant.
We did. I was out within about 2 to 3 weeks and went in to see my GP. My GP said, Nancy, I want to tell you, this is after tests, etc.
Sure.
I want to tell you something. You are a very well woman. And he said it 3 times.
Brilliant.
And people say it's spectacular, miraculous, whatever.
Yeah.
And it is. God has completely healed me, which is amazing.
So good. Well, we're glad you're still around and there's still more life in you yet. And then it wasn't long before you're back into doing your spiritual health weekends. And listen, particularly ladies, you can go on those. NancyGoudie.com is Nancy's website, where you can find out more about her, and there's all her books, and you can invite her along to speak, and she's still traveling internationally. So Nancy Goudie, what a treat to have you. God bless you, sister. Keep firing all the way.
Thank you, Simon.
Absolutely brilliant, guys. Woo, wonderful, isn't it? So I said you'd be inspired, and I trust you are. Share this, please, with your mates. Pass it along, gossip it along. I love it how that's it's just spreading the good news, isn't it? And next week we'll have another fantastic guest. Very different story. They're all so different, unique, aren't they? I want to thank Adam Thomas Steer for the editing, Mike Sandwin for the mixing. Please give us a great review on Spotify or iTunes. And in the meantime, have a great week. God bless and toodaloo.
Hi, could I ask for a favour? If you enjoy this podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a top quality review wherever you're listening right now. It just helps us with the algorithm to get in front of more people and spread the word. We've reached number 3. We'd like to get even higher in the UK podcast charts. That'd be wonderful. Thank you, and toodaloo.